we're gonna talk today about your very fascinating journey. I have to say that I've been obviously reading, learning, researching more about Gur, and there is so many things I wanted to ask you, but we'll only have to settle with talking about your journey as an entrepreneur, which is a lot to share, I'm sure. How you disrupted and leading your domain as Cato Networks, your go-to-market strategy, growth phases, and of course after that you will be able to ask Gur some questions. But before I'm moving on to you, I just want to give
just
some...
in answer to the question you asking me afterwards, we're hiring, so.
That's all you need to know. Thank you. Boom, we need the drums. So just before we start, to make sure everybody knows who's sitting next to me, then Gur Shatz is the co-founder and COO of Cato Networks, which is the first company to converge enterprise networking and security into one centralized and global service that is delivered by the cloud. And they even received their own product category named SASE, or S-A-S-E.
Sassy.
Sassy, by Gartner, so that's very sassy and amazing of you. Prior to Cato Networks, he was the co-founder and CEO of Incapsula, a cloud-based web application security and acceleration company. Before that, he was, get this, he was the director of product development, the vice president of engineering, and vice president of products at Imperva. And the reason he had at least 3 titles is because you were their first employee, so you had to move with it, right? And then you sold Incapsula to Imperva. And yeah, you did a lot of exciting things in this region. And without further ado, before we dive into the actual cyber and business and so on, we want to know who is Gur. So if you want to share a bit, who are you? What were your dreams growing up? What are your passions? What led you to what you do today?
Yeah,
you have a few minutes.
Yeah, I'll be short about it. I don't think it's the interesting part, what I did growing up, hopefully. And generally, I didn't think I would do startups. I really resented the idea of taking the danger out of things. And the only reason I wasn't in 200 unit as well. In fact, I was their arch nemesis coming from the Air Force, and they didn't like me at all. So I didn't have like the DNA to be a startup person. The only reason eventually that I joined one and then joined another and then started my own was that I was really bad at working with a lot of people, and I was too stubborn basically to accept any other people's directives. So where do you go if you need to be in charge? So that's the story.
But what were your dreams growing up? Did you have an idea what would you like to do as a grown-up?
Yeah, I wanted to be an astronaut. Lots of things. But software was never one of them.
Yeah.
So
it was just it happened. It happened.
Just happened.
Yeah,
Just happened.
which is life, as life has it. Now, again, you worked with 3 companies. You built them. You sold them. Some of them you developed them. So after those 20 years, what are your tips to building a company that is attractive for investors and clients? I know they're the usual answers, like great product, great team, but what are like real deep tips of building a company that is attractive to the market?
Yeah. So I guess that's the first thing everyone asks, right? What is it that investors are looking for, and what are they looking for in your companies? Who are here thinking about starting their company at some point? Cool. Okay. So let's start with the cold reality. Investors don't really care about the ideas. They don't necessarily go that way as the first thing they look at. Basically, investors look at teams. They're machine learning kind of people. They're like, their experience tells them that they invest in where people have already succeeded in the team, so they just pour their money there. But so that's the hard news for people raising money for the first time. But if you want to have a successful company that investors would look favorably on, you need to basically answer 3 questions, and hopefully those three questions that you're going to answer are going to be the exact three questions that the investors will look at. And the first thing is, what is so crappy in the world that it will be worth money to solve? What is the thing that is so crappy that really requires a solution? And I think that most companies, if you look at them, come out of the fact that there is some bit of crap in the world that nobody thinks can be cleaned up. And by that is like the first thing. Have you identified something that is worth money to solve? The second thing is, if it's something that's already broken in the world, why wasn't it fixed before that? I mean, why are you the first people coming into this trying to solve this problem? Doesn't make sense, right? Has something changed in the world that allows now for something to be solved? Is there an opportunity somewhere? And why is that? Because it makes no sense if it's a problem that has existed for a long time. It doesn't make sense that you were the first one to try to solve it, and that there are not like 20, 40, or 100 companies trying to do the same thing. And the last thing is, assuming you have both identified a problem and identified the opportunity why it can be solved right now, are you the right people to solve it? I mean, why you of all people? And that's something that investors are actually looking for. What they're looking for, in a way, with first-time teams, is, do you have some sort of secret knowledge about the problem? Do you know some sort of inside track about why it happens and how to solve it? Is there something special about you that nobody else knows that you can actually say, we can do this thing and nobody else before us did? And that's really the essence. So if you have a clear yes for the three questions, then you have a good company on the way.
So can you repeat the three questions again?
So one is, what is so crappy in the world that's going to be worth money to invest in and to get money out of? What is the opportunity? Why something can be solved now and has not been solved for like 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Why now, and what has changed so it's now possible? And the third thing is, why you? Why are you so special in your ability to solve something like that? So that's the three questions. Hopefully, you're up to set the next Facebook.
I love it.
It's not like Facebook.
Like Facebook, Meta, maybe Meta.
Yeah. Okay.
But I like how you structured it, and you also answered question to a question. But there is no one size fits all, of course. There is no one formula. So I think this is very, very helpful. Now, if I'm going back to your history, so you and Shlomo Kremer, which was your investor in Perva, and then obviously you created this company together. Then they decided they're going to create Cato Networks, and they were in, I don't know if it was a garage or an office for 2 months, trying to find the solution that Cato will provide to the world. And after 2 months of hard work, you decided it's a crappy idea.
Yeah.
So my question to you is actually two questions. How to know if an idea is crappy, and it's better 2 months than 2 years, of course, and if you had any formula to define a good product, a good solution.
So I can tell basically the story of why we changed our mind. Maybe it would sort of answer the question. It's a bit embarrassing. We haven't discussed a lot of our founding story. I think because it's a bit embarrassing. So the thing is that, but it's most companies have either, I guess, an embarrassing story or a made up one. So at least I'm on the.
Let's go to the authentic one.
Yeah. So the thing is that it's all about self-delusion. And when we set up to start the company, basically, we had a lot of ideas that we went through, coming from the knowledge that we gained, etc. And one idea was about like the cloud firewall. That was basically Cato, but we dismissed it almost immediately. I dismissed it because as undoable. we shouldn't get there because it's undoable. I dismissed it. And the real reason was that, for the previous 5 years, I've been running around trying to protect a managed network from botnet attacks and in a denial of service protection company. So who here knows what a botnet is?
Botnet?
It's what all your computers are doing when you're not protecting them. So someone takes over your computer and now it becomes a member of the botnet and goes to attack another site. Now, my previous company Incapsula, protected sites from botnet performing DDoS attacks. So then, who has heard about the term DDoS, distributed denial of service? Okay, cool. So 5 years, and I don't know if you realized it, but botnets do not operate during normal business hours. So you're just as likely to handle a crisis on Friday night as you are to handle it on Tuesday morning. So definitely I did not want to have anything to do with another critical infrastructure company for the next 10 years or so. So basically, so we went on and had another idea. And that idea had some similarities to what Cato was, but in that case, it was not a global network, a managed network. It had appliances, and they were safely tucked away, in the customer premises. So we didn't have to worry about maintaining an infrastructure. And the thing was that we were so desperate to have a good idea to work on, because basically we were like actors who thought that they will not get an acting job if they weren't also the director and the producer. So we knew we had to start something. And so we were so obsessed about having the right, and we just deluded ourselves and talked about it and working on this idea for like 2 months, with the computers and the appliances and all sorts of things. And then 2 months on, so at some point I think it was like an afternoon, we were talking on the phone, and Shlomo was telling me sort of, do you realize that in order for someone to buy this, it'll be an enterprise person buying and replacing this and replacing that and changing this and changing that, and we were looking at each other and or actually staring at each other because it was on the phone. There was like a silence, and then we said, no, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen, because for a moment there we had a big crack in our self-delusion, and like in the song when there's the crack, so the light gets in. We said, it's not going to happen. It's not good. And then Shlomo says, but what about the cloud firewall thing? Maybe that's doable. And I was like, give me 2 hours. I'll think about it. And after 2 hours, I came back and said, yeah, it's doable. And by that time, we had the whole company, minus one pivot. Everything was laid out, technology, architecture, everything was set at that time. And Shlomo was excited. I mean, he was like, yeah, this is going to be like Incapsula and Checkpoint together, and we're going to have like an infrastructure company and everything else. And I was like, yeah. and he didn't, I didn't think he realized, what we were signing in for at that point. And then like, fast forward to like 3 years later, and the company is up and running, and we have, production customers, and we have a global outage. And so, and global outage is like all the network is down, and so I'm in the ops room with our head of operations trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And we're like, and the network is down. Okay, that's the worst case scenario. That's years of your life. basically. So if you ever run infrastructure companies, that's the worst that can happen. So, and we're trying to figure out what's going on, and then Shlomo rushes into the room, and he mouthed to me, and I was sort of like doing that, just to keep him updated. So, and as I basically go like this, his phone begins to ring, and he picks it out of his pocket, and then I see him like looking at his phone like it was a live rat. And it's ringing, and I know exactly who it is, because there's one customer that has his personal phone number, and he was calling that minute because we had a global outage. And he looked so deflated at that moment, and that was the moment that you realized what we signed up for. So that was it. So the real thing about it is the moment where there's a crack in your self-delusion, and can I ramble a bit more on this? So a few years later, I read a different account that was so familiar that it just took my breath away, because it was the exact same thing. And it's a story, it's not even a startup story, it's a story about Intel. So Andrew Grove, the CEO, the legendary CEO of Intel, was telling the story of a time, and I think if you read the book, anyone read Only Paranoid Survive? You should. Great book, lousy title. But anyway, he was telling the story of how Intel was just being clobbered at one point by makers of, Japanese makers of memory chips. And they couldn't win because they were beating them on pricing, they were beating them on quality, they just didn't know how to win. And then, so Andrew Grove writes that, so he was sitting with Gordon Moore, the CEO then, they're actually standing, looking outside at the Ferris wheel, outside the corporate office in the amusement park nearby, and they were like very, very miserable. And suddenly, so Andrew Grove turns to Gordon Moore and says, when the board finally fires us, what do you suppose the new CEO is going to do? And Gordon Moore said, like, immediately, they'll get us out of memory. At that moment. And Andrew Grove is shocked. Like, what? And then he says, okay, but so let's assume that why don't we just step outside the room here and go back in and do exactly that? And that's exactly what they did. And that saved the company. Because what was inconceivable a moment before that, once they got a crack in their self-delusion, it became obvious a moment later. So in order to pivot, you really need to have this crack and really face up to, beyond all your biases, etc.
But I'm also taking from your story that once this crack is coming, it's also about the quality of your questions. They ask, what if someone that would fire us, or the board would fire us? So also about the quality of the questions that would help you find possibly the...
Yeah, you have to be honest about the questions and
yeah.
try to get some tough questions out there.
Which sometimes when you're pushed, then it's time where you can really find those answers. Now you have, fast forward, you have raised over $532 million, of course. And,
Más o menos, yeah.
Well, plus minus. Now, obviously, it's not your first rodeo, and you were both people who were appreciated in the industry, and I'm sure, obviously, you appreciate it, you proved it, you're talented. Then again, what would be your tips for startup founders? This may be their first startup, and also considering the economic climate, if there's any tip that you think you could give them on raising some millions, seed, A.
I'd say that, I was once asked, whether, whether we knew what we were doing, and our said that, 2 months, after 2 months we had everything laid out and you knew exactly what's going on and what the company would be and what was the architecture and what the technology was. Like after like the 2 months that we wasted, once we settled on what the cloud firewall would be, it was very, very
It was clear.
It was very, very clear.
Where you're going. Did you know it's going to be a unicorn?
I don't know. I'm not going to.
But you knew where you're going. Okay.
Yeah, we knew it was going to be big. We knew it was going to be big, and it was going to be a big effort, and we knew that if it worked, it would be a complete thing. We had one pivot left to make, but generally it was Cato. Now the thing is, when you think about it, so presumably we had like a year or so working on it, and you'd think that we didn't basically have to ask anybody or etc. And that was I was saying that we did not do what companies should do, and that was try to validate, go out and ask what's going on. But then I thought about it, and it's not really correct, because the most important thing for a startup is to go out and figure out whether the idea is good as it meets reality, and that's the most important thing for startups. Don't think that you have the answers in your room, and I think when I think about it, we didn't just look into the room and figure out what the idea for the company is. What we did was we then went ahead and validated it, because even before there was a product, and before we had a product out, we had like sales teams. We had salespeople trying to sell our non-existent product and getting real product feedback for that non-existent product yet. And it gave us some valuable insight as to who are the users that will buy it and who are the ones that maybe we shouldn't bother with. So just getting that feedback was enormous. We also paid a company to get us interviewed with all sorts of IT people, and to figure out whether they like the idea or if it's bad. And we also asked people. So there's a lot of validation that you need to do in order to know that you're on track. And that's a very important part of it, because there's no way that inside the office or wherever, the garage or wherever you are, you'll get answers toward the question of whether it's a really good idea or whether it's crap. So.
And I think that's a very important and good lesson, as you said. Eventually, this is how you learn. Now, it took Cato 1.5 years to tweaking your service offering. That's what you did in this 1.5 years? Or
I think actually, so 1.5 years sounds like a lot, but for infrastructure, that's like a blink of an eye, because just negotiating with data centers around the world and buying hardware and shipping it, that took months in itself. So, and as I said, so if you want to launch and have real production customers within 1.5 years, that basically means that within a year you have to be up and running.
Yeah.
Because for the first half of the second year, we were basically crashing the network every other week. So you have to have this you're complete on the features, and then you sort of make the way to graduate until you release. But it was really fast, looking back.
Yeah, as you said, in this industry. Now you have definitely succeeded in a competitive market. You became the market leader. Selling against Cisco, Palo Alto Networks, and many others. And a personal interest for me, and I'm sure for you too, is what was your first sales strategy when you're starting out, when you got your first pilot partners or first clients? And fast forward today, what is your sales strategy today that enabled you eventually to become a market leader?
Strategy, I think I really can say that the strategy for, if I think about our first major customer, the strategy was whatever I'm not going to say because they were on the service but they were like a major company, and the way that we addressed their issues, we were going to say yes to whatever they asked for, just make the sale and make sure that their network is up and running. basically, so the idea was to be desperate enough to just make it work, regardless. So is there like a buzz? Okay. Okay.
אפשר לבטל אחד, ואז לראות אם זה מוצאים.
So if I go like this, does it sound like?
maybe just a bit like that.
Can you try maybe something?
No. So I'll make it a bit further away. Does it still?
It's something that you have to be with speakers themselves.
You're checking it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because this is a...
So maybe it's here, something like that.
No, it doesn't.
No.
Sorry,
That's the
we're
recording.
working on it.
But you have good view. I can do an advertise for you.
Yeah. One thing I never wanted to be was a singer.
For what? A singer?
Never.
You can try one.
We're
you
not
can
going to
try-
ask you to do it today.
Fantastic.
Sorry, so you were talking about the sales strategy.
Yeah, so first customer is just make work his hell to make it work and sell to anyone who will buy. But one thing that is probably our biggest asset at first was the sales thing. So one thing that we had like a brilliant VP of marketing. Who's still our chief strategist today. And what he basically said was, if the idea is great, and if you have the right presentation, and it's structured really, really well, then you can go very, very further ahead. And you get a lot of points going into the from the sales pitch to the POC. So instead of just, schlepping something together, they built a very, very structured sales deck that had you could just read it out loud for salespeople. And once you have the corporate deck, and everyone knows about it, and everyone really practice on using it, then you have something that you can really replicate and work at scale at. And salespeople just, practice and deliver the sales pitch on the corporate sales deck, and we can know that it works, right? So they know how to do things, and they don't just improvise it. And that's important. I think the sales deck is really an often neglected part of the way you do things, especially in a time when it starts to change a lot, and you make the transition, so you will say, why do I bother? Maybe I'll just have a conversation. It's really, really important.
And so you said the sales deck at the beginning, so it was actually a scripted or a prepared,
Yeah, very.
You
And-
cracked it, you knew how to do it, and once you
Yeah,
knew it,
so-
you just replicated
So
it.
credit to Ishai, our VP marketing and strategist today. A lot of work went into really making it he called it a non-refutable presentation. It's sort of like, at the end of the presentation, it says QED, and it's done, because it answers all the questions. It's very, very well structured. It's something that you can just memorize and help you to handle objections, etc. So it's really, really important.
So that helped you at the beginning, and fast forward today, I'm sure you have a better and a different script, but still you managed to become market leader. So I'm trying to understand what else can we learn from what you did and how you did things.
I think, it's really a matter, it's for different companies and different startups, it'll be different. A company needs something like, a friend of mine once said, what's our unfair advantage? What's our unfair advantage against the competition? Every company needs to have this sort of idea that they have an unfair advantage somewhere that they can leverage the hell out of. For us, it was our architecture. We knew that nobody else is going to set up something similar, and we knew that we can leverage the hell out of it because we'll have better features and be more reactive and performance better. So we knew that was our unfair advantage, and that was what took us forward in a time where, frankly, nobody cared about it. because on the first 4 years that the company existed, nobody cared, and nobody knew why cloud firewalls or network as a service or firewall as a service did matter. Or there was a lot of haze in the air, and only like 4 years later, Gartner came up and says, we have this new invention called SASE, and they just copied everything we did. And once that was clear, then things sort of, architecture really became something that not just customers were caring about, but also like competitors and the market as a whole.
And it actually brings me back to where you started from. So when you said that both of you came from a very strong background in networks, again, in the cyber, in how to protect. And you said the founder should have strong, you said why you were the one. So why you saw the future, you saw where this industry is going because or thanks to your experience. And it seems like you actually brought it even to the market. Before the market knew there was a problem, you brought it to the market. And then when Gartner said SASE, it's like, we knew it already.
Yeah, we were like,
Yeah.
that's what we were saying.
Yeah.
As we were saying.
Gartner. That's amazing. Looking back, connecting the dots.
But it was, I think, if you look at most companies are very good at solving their own problems. So if you have a problem, then you can really, when I said that there's this secret knowledge that you come with, sometimes the knowledge is the fact that the problem that the company is trying to solve is your own problem. And you have the idea of how to solve it. So for us, our experience in managing networks, etc., made us aware of the fact that it was really crappy.
Yeah, and then as you said, it was an unfair advantage, and obviously, again, it's amazing that you have become the market leader and again, changed this industry. And this industry, again, cyber industry, on the one hand, considered kind of a stable, I would say. Now with everything that happens, everybody needs cyber, and it's getting stronger and more important as technology evolves. Having said that, and I'm referring to one of your former interviews, is that there are always not new Catos, but new players out there, that they bring different types of solutions. And with that in mind, now that you're being a bigger company and maybe processes are not as agile or fast to change as it was before, how do you defend your position as a market leader these days?
So I guess for companies coming to the market today, I'd say that generally what protects us today is that I talked before about unfair advantage. In the competitive sense, the same thing is also a moat. So the big question is, how fast do you need to run in order to outrun the competition, and how badly or how difficult is it going to be for someone else to try to build whatever you're building? And usually, if you have a high enough moat, it's not, actually a moat is dug enough, it's deep enough moat, right?
Yeah.
It's like where the crocodiles are. Anyway, so
just visited crocodiles last week in Key Largo.
yeah, exactly.
Saw them.
So the moat is the deeper it is, and the more crocodiles you have in it, the more you have security in that there won't be other companies and startups try to go after you. So if you want to have no competitors or not many competitors, really select a really shitty niche that nobody wants to touch, and you have security there. So I don't know if it's a good advice, but
you said create your unfair advantage in such way that it will be harder to crack and come. And if we're getting more into the Israeli cyber scene, and again with all the economic crisis and all the predictions and so on, how do you see the challenges that cybersecurity companies in Israel face? Challenges, and maybe is there room to be optimistic about what's coming?
Sure, there's room to be optimistic, because what fills me with optimism is the fact that the evildoers are not going to go away anytime soon. So for us, there's always going to be room and work to do. And that just fills me with great optimism. As it's like, you know, as long as there are graves, there'll be place for grave diggers. But generally speaking, I think that there's a problem in the cyber security realms today. I would not, recommend necessarily going into the cyber domain today unless you really, really know what you're doing and what you're. And the reason is. There's that. So and the reason is it okay now, or is it just my voice?
No, it's okay.
Oh, I was worried it was me. Anyway, so the thing about cyber is that I don't know how many cyber companies there are today in Israel alone. I think it's hundreds. And most of them are solving like niche problems and niche areas. And the world is not going there. The world is going into a different place. And I think that the real place that the world is going into is really. Well, maybe I'll start with a story. Like 25 years ago, many of you were not born then, but generally, like there was a company that tried to take over every experience users have online. The company was Microsoft, and they tried to take over the browsers. They tried to take over the user's operating system. And the Department of Justice in the U.S., basically cracked down on them and said, okay, we're going to split you up like we did AT&T. And they survived by the skin of their teeth and kept themselves a single company, right? And they figured out that maybe it wasn't such a good idea to try to monopolize consumers. Maybe we should let other browsers exist in our. And maybe not go after everything. And but on the other hand, they doubled down on monopolizing everything that was enterprise related. So what we're seeing today is that there's like all the big companies and enterprises just get sucked in to those large companies like Amazon's and Microsoft with Azure and all their cyber capabilities. And Palo Alto and their cyber capabilities, so there's not really room for a small niche solution to coexist with other solutions. Everything is going to get sucked into one or three or four black holes of functionality. So in the cyber realm, that means maybe if you're thinking short term, you might get acquired. But on the longer term, everything is going to get sucked into one center of gravity or another. We hope to become a center of gravity at Cato rather than being sucked into someone else's center of gravity. But generally, that's the trend that things are going. It's not going to the niche, it's going to the center.
And that's, I like how you put it, like how you view it, your strategy.
Yeah.
Where you're going to be the center.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything's still.
Yeah, everything is strategized. Now, I don't want to embarrass you again, but me and I'm sure all of us here, you did something amazing, and you really live the dream of a lot of entrepreneurs that would love to become leaders of their industry and work in different and create different companies and so on. And in the former interview, I think it was with Guy Katzovich, I think you mentioned that you sold Incapsula, and when you sold the company, it was such a hard feeling for you. It was, I think the word, I'm not sure even was kind of a failure, a very hard, tough feeling of selling a company. And if you can get us into your mind of how the experience of selling a company, how do you experience it? Why was it so hard for you?
Well, I think it depends. I can mime it maybe, but the thing is that when I think every entrepreneur thinks and wants to set up the last company, the one that would go out to the horizon, and they never do in a way. right? It's very rare for a company to go really all the way and keep growing and keep advancing, and it's something change always gives up in the end. And well, I know it's really.
You know what? We can.
I think that
Maybe
maybe we
let's
can
do
do
like
without.
this. Yeah.
Is it okay?
You
Is
don't
it
mind?
better? I'll just raise
Yeah.
my voice.
Microphone check. Okay.
Okay.
I think it's because of the microphone on the.
We try, but I don't want you to suffer from this. Let's try without, and if you feel like you're too much,
This thing. Right?
yeah. If you feel like it's too much, then just take it.
Okay, so no, right now?
Wow, no.
I hope so.
Amazing. So now, finally, we get like a good sound. So, no, just a second. Maybe like it's like a position. If I'm like this.
Maybe we'll handstand.
Okay.
One leg.
Okay. So.
So which
So I'll talk loudly, and my natural voice does not hiss, so it's going to be okay. Where were we? We were talking about
company, selling a company, and how was the
okay.
experience for you?
So the core thing is that I always wanted to set up the last company, the one to die in, the one that would continue on and flourish forever. It doesn't happen. And the thing is that if you think that if it's a matter of whether it was the way it was supposed to be, then okay. But if you're sort of frustrated with the way things went, then you can take that frustration of not having like achieved the maximum, the maximum potential, or fulfilling the maximum potential, and then take that on and try to do something else, something better, something that would last. So the problem was not selling the Incapsula and having it acquired. The problem was that I thought that it was not fulfilling the potential that it was supposed to have. And it was an amazing company, and I think it could have gone all the way, but unfortunately, things didn't go out that way. So I'm not going to talk about it.
It was like a child.
Yeah,
actually,
and so it was sort of, there's a sort of grief related to that, and then you sort of have like, we need to fix it. I need to have something to fix that, and that was the
Yeah.
basic idea.
Thank you for sharing this. I want to talk a bit about, I'll use this a bit, about leadership. So you work in different companies that grew very fast, from 5 to 2 to 15 to 80 to hundreds of employees. What tools you have to guide your managers as you grow to keep the commander's spirit and the right messages from up, down, as the company grows? So when you have 5, 10 people, it's easy to get all the messages and all the vibe of the company come across. But when you have 15, 20, you have managers and more managers. What would be your tip to growing companies here to make sure that the messages and the vibe
Anyone in
and
the
the
audience,
DNA?
anyone in the audience would define themselves now or in the past as managers, managing like people?
I used to manage.
Yeah.
Like 8 people.
Cool. So, at first, managing is something that's really, really easy for people in the start, because it's basically just an extension of their own capabilities, right? If you're a team leader and you know what's going on, and you can manage by leading and by example, and it's really easy. It's really, really the natural progression. But at some point, if you start to manage more people and maybe even teams of people or teams of teams, you're going to get the call. Someone is going to have the conversation with you. By the way, is anyone here have been like second line manager? Not so, right? So if you go on and grow, then someone will take you and put out the conversation about, you should really get back and stop, don't be so hands-on, give people opportunity, don't micromanage, etc. And people often misunderstand what micromanagement means and what not to do and should do. And I think that's something that we're trying at Cato to be really, really disciplined about and to explain. And I think that's one of the things that make it a unique company, that you should really, go to all your friends and recommend it as a place to work.
By the way, they're hiring. They're hiring. Just
Anyway,
making sure you
shameless
remember.
But what we're telling people is make the distinction as you become managers, but also like when you're employee, when you're individual contributors, make the distinction between being in the details of something and really, tracking mails and progress and what's going on in Slack and being in the details of something versus having deep domain knowledge. And I think what happens with companies that grow really, really fast, or people that advance really, really fast, is that they keep updated, they're in the details, they know what's going on, but at some point what they neglect is the understanding of the deep, technology that they've come from, etc. And especially once your scope grows, you're not going to understand everything that you manage. And as the company grows, you're not going to understand everything that you manage really, really clearly as you understood what you actually worked on with your hands. So you see more and more managers as they progress, managing from their memory. They're not learning new things. They're managing from what they remember happened. And that has nothing to do with being a micromanager or not micromanaging. It does not have anything to do with in-detail knowledge and not having in-detail knowledge of what's going on. It's about whether you really understand what's going on at the ground level of your organization. Whether you manage a team or whether you manage a group or whether you manage something bigger than that. And the thing is that if people stop learning new things and they stop going into like what's the experience of the developers, what's the experience of the salespeople, etc. They stop learning new things and they just put themselves with all the details of the day-to-day, they become less and less good managers over time. That's my perspective. So what I tell people to do is invest in learning things. If you were a programmer and people say, yeah, you should stop doing that, it doesn't make any sense. No, you should go and drill down into the areas that you know less about. Even at the expense of keeping up to date with whatever's going on, but learn the areas that you know nothing about today, because these are the areas that might get corrupted and you won't know that. So it looks like something that has to do with technology, but I'll give a story because I had just like this conversation yesterday, and I was talking with our VP of HR, and I mentioned it before. So one example was that a VP of HR in a company. I'm really hoping that I'm not like I'm talking about her like this and she's not here. But never mind.
We can send it to her.
Yeah. She'll but generally, and I also talked about it in the past, so it's okay. She knows. But one of the things is that being a VP of HR is a lot of detail, right? You need to really keep up to what's going on with the processes, what's going on here. It's a lot of mail to read and calendar, and your calendar is full. But then there's something that she needs to learn, and there's something that she doesn't know very well. And one of them, for example, is like the legal situation in Europe, or the job, all the legal stuff that goes around job, which is really, really complex, needs a lot of work, needs a lot of drilling down into. So she needed to clear time for her to understand what's going on and to understand this scope that was like a blind spot for her. But once she did that, and once she cleared that information, and once she was deep in the knowledge there, she could have like conversation with lawyers and with people on her team, and not waste time communicating and having them explain to her all sorts of stuff, because she was like an insider then. And she took the time to do that at the expense of maybe keeping up to date and what the percentage is, et cetera, et cetera. So at some point, she cleared the time, dug down deep into understanding something that was a black hole. And I think all managers should do that. They should take a time, maybe a third of their time, really digging in and understanding what's going on in the areas of their organization that they know little about. And without it, you get like stagnation in the end. So that's what we're trying to do at Cato, and that's the kind of company Cato is, and that's why it's a great place to work.
Higher. pushing people forward, really.
No, that's it.
So we really, I think that was an amazing tip. And actually, my next question is another question, last question about, I call it the routine of a leader. And again, not every day that I get to interview leading a company, and I'm sure you have routines that we can all learn from. One thing that I read is that you investigate all events and productions and what happens in the market every week. Like you have a week, like an investigation meeting once a week.
Mm-hmm.
There's maybe another tip that you can give us that is, you think, possibly unique to Cato, that is a routine that really helps you excel and keep competitive.
So maybe I can explain like the weekly investigation that we do and what it really means and why I think it's something that's central to the way companies should behave and how companies should be managed. Maybe what's the best way to put it. And the thing is that, you know, if you're a company, you don't necessarily improve over time. I mean, you know how you operate, but you operate in different areas, etc. But do you improve over time? And the only way that you can improve over time is set up specific feedback loops around what you're doing wrong, where you can improve. And it's very, very difficult to set up a feedback loop around things that are as big as a project. I mean, has anyone here participated at some point in a post-mortem of a project, a large-scale project, like 3 months project? Was it helpful at all? Was it?
Yeah.
Because 3 months is a lot to parse, right? How do you learn something that happened like in 3 months? Was it good? So basically, if you have like a 3 months old project, with a post-mortem, you basically have like different stories people tell about different times, and they're basically uncommunicating, etc. Because you need to have a feedback loop that works. And the thing is that one of the areas where feedback loops actually work is production issues. And if you look at the production issues and ask the right questions, you can improve and sort of take, the scope is small enough to actually figure out what went wrong and how to improve. And that is a feedback loop. And I think that the idea of feedback loops in a company and in a product is just so important, because startups that have broken feedback loops have crappy products. That's, from experience. So getting that loop into improvement is terribly important. That's
Amazing. Thank you so much. Now I have a few, I would say rather short questions, and then we'll go over to you. So the first one would be, you said, and I think also in our preliminary call, that the journey is your teacher. However, if you could still name one tip that you wish you had when you started, what would it be?
Except wear sunscreen.
There is a song for that, you can find it on Google.
Actually, I've been asked that a lot. I've now started saying, that if I could give a tip to young people, it would be keep a journal. What you think you remember now is not really what happened. So I really can't really attest to what I did like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I really wish I had a journal then to keep, figuring out what actually went there.
And wear sunscreen.
And wear sunscreen,
Write it on the beach. So very cool tip. And the second thing, I know that you love reading books and listening to podcasts. You just mentioned a book before, but is there any book or podcast that you think would be beneficial for us?
I didn't think about it, but I'll just suggest in general that books and podcasts are so important. And I think maybe I'll put podcasts aside, because people, listen to podcasts like they're like they're crackers or some sort of Cheetos or something. It's easy, it passes the time, it's cool, it's like, but if you don't read books, then you lose a lot of the dimensions of thinking about things, etc. I think it's incredibly important to read, not just and not just not just to listen to things, but to read. And I think that the fact that today there's audiobooks means that you can get back to the world and try to read more. And without it, you lose a lot of the dimensions of things. And there are amazing books out there about how to run a company, how to sell, how to do this, how to do that, as well as things that you just enrich the lives of people. So just read audiobooks if possible. That's I don't have like
Do
something.
you have any topics that you specifically like to read about?
I try to read all sorts, from mystery to science fiction to self-help to business to economic to languages. So I don't remember much of it, but I try to read.
And personal tip, don't forget your book in your vacation. I bought a book, I read half of it, and I forget it in the hotel somewhere in Miami.
Oh.
So it just really hurts, but I'll
What
go
was
back
the
and
book?
buy
Maybe
it.
someone can tell you the ending.
I'll tell you later. It's a espionage kind of book.
Okay, that's someone should definitely tell you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And last question is, what drives you these days? What's your passion? What drives you in work, in life these days?
I don't know. Maybe I'll pass on that question, but
Okay.
but I think every day just being concentrated and maximizing the time in the day where you're in flow. I don't know if you read or know about this concept of flow. If you maximize the time in the day that you're in this mode and you're engaged and you're doing stuff, that's probably.
That's a great time. That's a clear time. You feel you really fulfill yourself. You're in the zone, and that's
In the zone is like
yeah,
a good word.
that's a
for it.
good time to
Yeah.
I think
So
that's
just
a
getting
great point to be
as
at.
many hours
Yeah.
as possible
Yeah.
in the day where you're in the zone, either alone or together with people doing like creative work together or discussion, brainstorming, versus the mind-numbing, presentation meeting where you just go slide by slide by slide onto oblivion. So
Thank you so much for
thank you.
getting us into your world.